And Rey is presented as this self-reliant scavenger, and she always carries a pole with her to defend herself. Luke lives for 19 years of his life without any concept of the Force. Which one do you think was done better?
You have two professions. You have one that's a farmer and the other one that's almost a mercenary.
Hello there. Welcome to Star Wars Timeline. Today's topic of discussion I will find that most fans will find equally divisive but also curious and interesting. My good friend Phil and I will study the curious case of Rey, the Mary Sue. But please worry not, guys. Okay, stop for a second. This is not two Chads who are going to disparage the sequels or blame Kathleen Kennedy. No, this is just two guys, two fans, having an earnest discussion, which hopefully you will find fun and amusing at the same time. My friend Phillip from the X platform, he will take position of Rey. He will discuss her and talk about the character traits that he finds good. Me on the other side, I'll take the devil's advocate position and I will try to discuss things which could have been done a little bit better. Phil, I'm happy to have you here. We've been trying to do this podcast for quite a while. Finally, it's happened. Yeah. Tell us, how are you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm someone who, just like everyone else, I think everyone got through their Star Wars fatigue at some point. I've recently got out of it. Sometimes you just gotta take a step back and then you can come back in, and recently I really think sometimes Disney can be a little too much with their content.
And I think it's fair to say that no one fan loves everything unanimously and just consumes all of the stars. Whether they're talking about the older George's generation and the expanded universe, on the new material, there's always gives and takes. There are particular stories that speak to us more than others. Philip, I wanted to establish a baseline first of our audience, our viewers who get to check out this podcast, get a general sense of what we're like, what we're into. Clearly, probably folks who visit my website and channel know me a little bit better, but we're also meeting you for the first time. And tell us, when did you first encounter Star Wars, and today, what does it mean to you?
Right. So, we both come from the same generation of TV where everything was programmed TV. We didn't have a choice. We had to watch whatever was on TV. And I guess one of the coolest things that I got to see on TV was Star Wars. Like, I didn't care if it was episode 4, 5, or 6, if it was on TV, that's what I was doing for the next hour or two. I was watching Star Wars, and I just fell in love with so much of the mystique that the Force has, and how they have this like religion, right? They have this whole religion based on the Force, and it was just so captivating for my young mind, as a kid. And I was big into video games, and my dad was too. So when he realized he's into video games, he started giving me some Star Wars games. And the first game that I ever played was actually called Mysteries of the Sith. That was the very first one I ever played. And it was just so cool to play a game where I could have a lightsaber and slice up stormtroopers. Like, it was the greatest thing ever to me.
It's awesome to hear that to you it was a sort of multimedia experience. You got to get to see it on TV. You played the video games. It's quite an interesting and a different angle. But parallel to Star Wars, as a part of your childhood, can you name other TV shows or maybe movies that really stood out in regards to these heroic, larger-than-life archetypes that were memorable to you?
So, as a kid, there was a lot of cartoons, man. The 90s was just pumping out cartoons. And, I watched a lot of Thundercats, and I watched a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. A little bit later on, I did start getting into the more anime stuff, with Dragon Ball. And
obviously Naruto came about on the heels of the Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. And I think what really called to me were just these characters of no matter what happened. I guess Goku would be the definite character of this. No matter what happens, they always had good mood, and they were just like, you know what, let's just do this, right? And so, like, what really calls to me are characters like this. Even in the face of adversity,
Mhm.
they're like almost unbreakable. So when I talk to fans and I hear their pain about talking about The Last Jedi and how Luke was portrayed, I understand. I do get it. But I'm not on that side of the fence. I'm actually on the opposite side of the fence with Luke. You
But I
know,
think it's also a valuable piece of detail that you're giving us here, and I think will be very relevant to the discussion, is that
very
you're
much,
the sort of
yes.
fan who likes this type of charismatic heroes that we can aspire to and who always have the positive notes. I think it's extremely important, especially when we're going to get to the discussion of The Last Jedi. Guys, I assume it's going to be our next podcast because I'm dividing into the three. We want to give each sequel movie its due time to be able to pick it apart and look at the details there under the prism and to see what was going on there. A couple of more general questions in regards to sequel versus prequel anticipation and hype. Do you have a memory or a recollection when the prequel movies came out in theaters? Can you describe what the hype was like in your area where you were from?
Okay, so when episode one came out, I I was really excited, but my brother was more excited. He was older, my brother's 6 years older than me. So at the time he was I think he was about 14 or 15 years old,
Mhm.
right? We got to go see it in the cinema, and I was super excited. I was about 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old at the time. I was very excited. Wait, no, it was 99, right? So I was 8 years old. I was definitely 8 years old, and I was just so excited. And that movie as a kid watching it, it was fantastic. It was amazing. It was spectacular. And I mean, of course, everybody knows about the double-bladed lightsaber. My eyes were, just yeah, they just opened wide up so much. But when I saw that happen, um, but my brother was older. So he saw through some things, and he was more well educated in Star Wars and Star Wars lore at the time than I. So it was an interesting experience because I got out of it thinking like, oh, that movie was great, and then my brother was not like that. Like he was like, yeah, the ending was cool, but like I
But the
remember him saying
rest,
like it's
right?
kind of boring film.
You know what's crazy, Philip?
Yeah.
You're describing my exact situation because I'm also 6 years apart with my younger brother, and we also saw it in theaters in New York City on
Yeah.
42nd Street. And he came out of Phantom Menace loving it. There's no complaints about Jar Jars or
Yeah, no, I
CGI
loved
characters.
Jar Jar at
Yeah,
the time.
he loved it all. I, on the other hand, unlike your older brother, I didn't have this vast experience of Star Wars just outside the main films because I came from Russia. I was 4 years in the country, and all I knew was just Star Wars. I have not started reading. I wasn't even aware of any Star Wars existing outside of the main films, so I didn't have any prior expectation. To us back then, even the word prequel was kind of new. Like, hold on a sec. Oh,
Yeah,
we're
that was
going back
weird.
in
Yeah.
time, right? And when I saw it, the hype and anticipation and seeing all these crowds literally going around corners and corners on 42nd Street were amazing. People dressing up as Jedi, having like toy lightsabers. It was insane. But Philip, now we had sequel generation come out. Do you also
Yeah.
make a comparison? Can you recollect, despite what today's feelings are, and a lot of people are very resentful and neglecting sequels, can we speak back to what your memory was of fans reacting to the hype behind the sequels?
All right, so I'm actually gonna uh I'm gonna recollect a video that has been coming out. It's actually just one video about an audience showing of people in ridicule about the rise of Skywalker,
Mhm.
and a lot of people paint it like, oh yeah, that was the general reaction. I watched the Rise of Skywalker 3 times in the cinema because I liked it at first, and I still like it today with all its flaws. I do still like it today, but it was a film like, nah, I gotta watch this again. Like,
Mhm.
what's wrong with this movie? Like, and uh every time that I went, there was not people complaining about the film. A lot of people, most of the casual viewers, they loved. that movie, you know. And I think that actually happened in all the films, all three of those films, where most people were very satisfied watching the movie. It was only later on, once they got on the internet and talking to people, that the general consensus started to change rapidly. It wasn't even like it didn't take a long time. It was very quickly.
Hmm.
It was very fast. I'm a guy who I criticize Star Wars theory. I do love his videos. I love when he doesn't talk about the sequel trilogy. I really do.
Hmm.
But when he talks about it, I always remember the video of his first review of The Last Jedi and how much he loved it. And he even cried in the video. And I remember watching that video, and he completely changed his point of view
And to speak
afterwards.
up to that a little bit, I think we're all allowed to evolve our opinions,
Of
and I don't
course,
think
yeah, of course.
people. It's really dysfunctional approach to try to pinch somebody's little videos. Yeah, aha, see what you said about
yeah.
25, 30 years ago. It's people's always evolve. What you loved before, maybe with new insight, you don't revere it as much as before, and I think it's totally fine. It's okay to do that. Guys, a little preface
Definitely.
before we start jumping and discussing The Force Awakens and our main hero or heroine, Rey Skywalker, who she turns out to be. A little bit of preface that I want to say that in most cases, there is a stark difference between what a filmmaker wants to do, his initial idea, versus what ends up on the screen. Because all of the fans, we're not privy of all the politicking and the technical details of executing a film, which is a lot of professional filmmakers and reporters and journalists talk about the challenges of doing that. And I think we've all heard J.J. Abrams openly state in the video saying, like, we didn't really have a plan, and I don't want to beat it over and over and over again. Most of the fans are aware to the fact. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you in general as a trilogy overall, what do you think J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson's approach was? What did they want to express in their prequels, and have they succeeded?
Well, I think that the biggest problem is they started the whole thing on the wrong foot, right? They started with, well, I'm not going to say Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson is clear. I'm going to talk about J.J. Abrams, because J.J. Abrams, he started with the idea of let's please the fans. And to me, that's like a big issue. In the first film, I'm completely fine with what they did. Yeah, they kind of do like a soft reboot or whatever, but in a way to introduce the new characters, it's okay. It's something familiar. That's fine. The problem is more in the third film, in the ninth film. In the ninth film is just all the time just trying to cater to the fans and what their opinion was of The Last Jedi, you know, and that was, in my opinion, that's where they really messed up. I think they could have had a really solid trilogy if they just didn't listen to the fans. It's like, you know what? Let's keep going. Let's
Yeah,
roll with it.
I absolutely agree, because some of the greatest Hollywood cinema that emerged in the 80s was produced in a culture of filmmakers who stood by their stories. And they weren't made in the committees. And a lot of filmmakers like George Lucas in 70s and 80s, they had to battle for their stories, Francis Ford Coppola, with the studio executives and say, no, this is the way I want to tell my story. And there was more integrity to that versus today's, let's look at the charts or Excel sheets. What sells? What is the audience responding to? Like these committee-made movies, they feel very contrived. And I think that's one thing that you and I can converge some of our agreements on, is that a lot of the elements of the sequel trilogy feels very, very contrived. But please don't forget, you're supposed to take the pro-sequel side, okay? Okay.
No, because like there's nothing that's perfect, all right? Like let me give you my point of view. We were talking about, you know, how our opinions can change, right? And one thing that astonishes me is every time I watch the Star Wars movies, my ranking order almost completely changed. The only one that pretty much stays the same is Empire. Empire is at top forever, pretty much. Maybe one day that'll change, who knows? But like I've gone from adoring Return of the Jedi to really, really hating Endor on it. And then enjoying Endor.
Okay.
It's like yeah, I've been really wild. So like because I've been watching these films since I was a kid, so my opinions change.
Mhm.
And I've come to the understanding it's like, okay, they're definitely not perfect. They're really not perfect.
And
And
it's
it
totally
applies.
okay to like
Well,
something that is not entirely flawless and say, look, okay, I recognize the flaws here, but I just want to hear about it all day and night because I love the movie. That's also okay
yeah,
to do. But
yeah.
the time has come.
All right.
The story and journey of Rey, okay? She is obviously the central figure in Star Wars sequels. And
Yeah.
I think the intention behind it was the story of self-discovery and stepping into the larger galaxy, sort of paralleling Luke Skywalker. And you know from
Mhm.
various sources that George Lucas's early story treatments also had some kind of a female lead, where the details
Yeah.
obviously vary depending on which sources you listen to. And we also had a concept of some sort of estranged or maybe a hermit version of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
And the execution of sequel trilogy left a lot of fans conflicted, to say the least, just like the prequels did. In my
Mhm.
memory, the fans didn't have a unanimous, decision or thoughts on
No.
either film or either character. The first
I'm
question I want
somebody
to,
who
yeah,
I didn't even go to see episode 3 because I saw how Anakin's style was, because
mhm.
at the time emo metal was kind of the thing. So there was like that. And when I saw that, I was like, he looks nothing like the concept art that I've seen.
Yeah.
It looks completely different. And it threw me off, you know? It really threw me off. But I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. That's all good. Guys, we want to have a good time here. As you've probably deduced by now, the point here is not to trash on the sequel trilogy. It's just to have a fun conversation, just
Yeah.
sort these details and our feelings out and our differences, because I think that's what we ought to do as a fandom, talk about these things. The first question I wanted to throw with you is sort of kind of like a general umbrella, taking into account Rey's journey from beginning to the very end. Can you make a very brief case for her that her journey was well earned and she makes a great character?
Yeah. I truly believe that a lot of people who watch these movies, they're really accustomed to the physical.
Mm.
And something that these movies excel at is really showing what emotional trauma can do to somebody. And her journey is exactly this: is she is someone who was, whether you read the books or not, it does not matter. She was abandoned by her parents, technically. All right. She had to survive on this planet, and she is the Rey nobody. That's who she is, right at the beginning of the story. It's exactly who she is, and she doesn't know where to go. Now, whether you agree with Rey Skywalker or not, we can all come to terms that in the end, she knows who she is. So
Okay, all
that's
right.
the whole journey, in my opinion, for her. It's more about her surpassing this emotional loneliness of where I am and where do I fit in this whole galaxy.
I think that's an interesting point, and it's an angle actually from which I also view and I find Rey likable. It's the emotional
Mhm.
component. But now I'm going to make a contrast, the opposite counter argument to yours, is that where a lot of the fans complained that there wasn't enough on-screen representation of Rey's growth and her journey. And I think that criticism isn't coming out of blue, because when you take any classical timeless story, the King Arthur and Excalibur, a
Mhm.
heroic archetype must demonstrate not just his willingness to step onto his journey and take on
Mhm.
responsibility for saving the world around him. He also needs to prove himself. He needs to face challenges which are mortal threat to his body, so to speak, to illustrate it in the most obvious sense. It can't be
Yeah.
just this internal conflict. I was like, oh, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. These outside exterior forces need to influence the hero in order for us to connect with and to believe in that hero. And I just feel that it wasn't done completely enough in the sequel trilogy. We started off on the ground that sort of satisfied the basics, and we're going to go through this discussing The Force Awakens right now. But as the story evolved, I think I would agree with you that a lot of it was due to fans' backlash, and very unfortunately, the filmmakers responding to that. It's like, for example, jumping ahead, guys, I felt that Rey Skywalker was a blatant response to fan criticism. And J.J. Abrams confessing to, we always wanted to bring Palpatine in one way or another. It was always part of it. No, it wasn't, because you could see it on screen. Fans said, well, we don't believe in this.
The same thing with the General Hux being the spy. It's
exactly.
Came completely out of the blue.
Yeah, and fans were very valid in saying, look, this hero that you're showing us, we don't believe her, because you're going in 10 different directions with us, and your personal concept of her is not solidified, and we can't follow you if you don't know where you're leading us through the forest. And why should we care? Phil, The Force Awakens. Here we go. Okay, this is where all the juicy stuff and questions I've prepared for you. I'm hoping you're able to defend your girl.
I love The Force Awakens so much. It's not in my top 3. Definitely. I mean, that it's ridiculous for me to even say like I really love it, because I really love all the movies.
Yeah.
But it's a film that I have really studied, because I think a lot of people did, right? Once it was released, we watched it over and over and over again, and we really tried to figure out what's going to happen next, right?
Yeah. Well, guys, we're going to put Philip's study to the test right now. I have some counterpoints here. I brought some weapons to this discussion. Okay, let's go. So we meet an orphan with a forgotten past. She's dreaming of reunion with her lost family, which was communicated in the films. And Rey is presented as this self-reliant scavenger, right? She looks after herself. She has some understanding of technology. It's reasonable to believe, right? Because she goes all through these wrecked ships on Jakku. And she always carries a pole with her, which it's not hard to imagine she probably used more often than not to defend herself, right? We actually see her later on using it to fight off some attackers. And she also states that she is a pilot, because when her and Finn are charging to this heap of garbage, she says, we need a pilot.
She
says, we got one.
She's a pilot, but yeah.
Right. Now, a little bit of contrast here. The movie that a lot of us love and defend and cherish, A New Hope. Luke lives for 19 years of his life without any concept of the Force, because when Obi-Wan Kenobi relates it to him later on in his home, it's all news to Luke, right? He has Obi-Wan Kenobi's brief description, and he has one training exercise with a drone aboard the Millennium Falcon. And later on, he uses that skill, that brief knowledge that he has, to use the Force, obviously, in the final attack on the Death Star. And it's also stated when Luke says, look, I'm not such a bad pilot myself. Pretty early on in the movie, he tells Han in his cockpit, when Han acts all cocky and he says, a kid, without these calculations, Luke says, I'm not such a bad pilot myself. We're shooting womp rats in Beggar's Canyon. So we get a little bit of interesting information, very important to the character right off from the beginning. And we also see him do not exactly too well versus the Tusken Raiders, because he pretty much gets his ass handed to him.
Well, he's not a warrior, right? He
right.
works in his farm with his uncle. Like he has skills, life skills, but he doesn't have warrior skills.
I specifically chose that scene because we're comparing him to Rey. First question. I would say we're off to a decent start, but how would you say Rey is different to her counterpart, Luke Skywalker, specifically in this episode 4 and The Force Awakens? Which one do you think was done better?
Well, what do you mean by better? Because
more believable.
They are different. Well, more believable. I can't even answer that question, just because to me they're both just as believable. The difference is, like, you have two professions. You have one that's a farmer and the other one that's almost a mercenary. Like, if you watch the film and you pay attention, you know that Rey, she's well known by the people, and she's even feared by some of the people. you have a point where I actually forgot the name of the character. He's riding a big animal and he's trying to take BB-8, you know, and Ray just gets up close to him. He's like, hey, like, get out of here, you
She
know,
shoos him away. Yeah.
and yeah, shoos him away. And someone to just like shoo him away, either he's obviously a coward, you know, or he knows her reputation. When you see her going through the town, you know, she's known by people. Like people, the people there are very reserved, but they just focus on their work and just like try to get through the day.
It's a hard life
So
on Jakku.
it's a very hard life. You know, it's a very different life. Like when people try to compare Luke and Ray, I feel like they're only looking at the sand.
Ah, okay. Okay, that's an interesting point. And let's not forget also that even though I made light of Luke's first encounter with Tusken Raiders where he gets beat up, he also carries a blaster rifle with him, which stands again to reason if he's carrying it as any frontiersman would, chances are he knows how to use it. He just got caught off guard. They attacked him head on because Tuskens are fierce warriors. Let's not forget that. He's not just confronting some sand bombs, right? They're very fierce warriors, and they attack him out of blue.
Always.
Yeah, I would say any counter argument saying that Rey is inferior to Luke are kind of a little bit ridiculous here, because for me, both characters in that respect, overall, it takes some faith with little clues equally represented in A New Hope and The Force Awakens, which kind of sort of demonstrate and make a small case for why they're capable, both of them.
Yeah.
But it takes just as much of a leap of faith in believing Luke's Force abilities by the end of A New Hope, just as it does with Rey Skywalker. Rey, let's say no one at this point, but with Rey, it's a lot more pronounced. And I will get to that later. I'll explain that specific point later, but it's a lot more pronounced, clearly because of the lightsaber duel, which Luke never has at the end of A New Hope. Now, another thing I wanted to touch upon is each film is a product of its time. And obviously, The Force Awakens, for better or for worse, introduces some of the modern sensibilities that will appeal to the youth, to a new generation of fans. And we see that in a way of J.J. Abrams making a slight kind of joke where both Rey and Finn are being attacked by the TIE fighters, and they both drop to the ground. The first instinct that ex-stormtrooper wants to do is help her. And she says, ew, stop holding my hand. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And what is that all about? Was it needed to convey Rey's independence?
This is not, I think a lot of people look at this wrong because they look at it like, oh, damsel in distress situation, right? She's a damsel. I must help her, right? But I see it more as her like, get away from me, as she's a loner, man. She has been a loner for more than a decade. She's not used to anyone touching her. I relate a lot to that because I'm also a learner. And if I was running around independent, if I'm male or female, and someone grabs my hand, I'm good, man. You don't need to hold my hand. It's fine.
Yeah. And even though their relationship later on is positioned as buddies, best friends, right? There is no romantic thread between them. Touching someone's hand of the opposite sex who you may find potentially at least visually appealing, because that's the first judgment that we make, right? And Daisy Ridley, she's a beautiful actress, and Johnny Boyega, right? He's a handsome guy. He's a handsome fellow, well built, charismatic. You know, he has good stage presence. You're touching someone's hand that you never felt before. I'll be honest, guys. This is my argument against it. When it's said once in the film, it felt like a joke, because I'm not going to make this up. The honest audience reaction in theaters, people were laughing. All my friends were laughing.
Oh, I was laughing too.
When he was doing it the second time and the third time, it wasn't funny to me anymore. I wasn't just like, oh, droopy face and saying, oh my God, what is this messaging here? A word that is often being used. But to me, it was, you're overdoing it. All right, we got the point. We got the sense of who she is. You don't need to beat us over the head of how strong she is. Trust us to believe into your character.
Yeah, I didn't get that sense. I don't get that sense at all, man.
Well, that's what I got.
What I get is more like Finn's a guy. He has not been with a girl. and he really wants to get with a girl.
Hormones.
Yeah, I really feel like he's being insistent, and she's like, "Dude, like, can you chill out? We're
Yeah,
like in the middle of doing stuff, and you're
exactly. And it is a
focused
dire
on that."
situation for them, right? It's they're trying to
Yeah.
escape. But why I can't hold a grudge against that scene for too long is the scene that follows. Because when they drop to the ground again and Finn ends up on the floor, like on the sand, the first thing he says when he comes to, he says, "Are you all right?" And it's a brilliant piece of performance from Daisy Ridley, where she's checking him out. It's like, who is this guy? He's nearly blasted out of the sand, and the first thing he does is show concern for me. And for me, it sort of was an equalizer. She was making her first gesture of trust, saying, "That's who he is. That's why he grabbed my hand. He's concerned for people." And to be able to ignore it, to make your very strong case for why, The Force Awakens and trash, and make all these YouTube videos with laser eyes shooting out and blaming. I'm thinking, didn't you see the movie? It's in there. Like, you could clearly brush it off to make your statements there, but it's there. And for me, unfortunately, my criticism of "stop holding my hand" multiple times, it kind of falls flat. So I think I'd lose there.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not gonna lie. I'm somebody where if I'm not in the right mindset, man, I am destroying films. I'm constantly destroying films. And like what I was saying before about the Return of the Jedi. I watched that movie a few times where I was just not in the mood, man, and and I just destroyed that film. And it's not, I realized, I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna watch Star Wars, this is something about my childhood. Unless if there's something completely wrong in it, it's like I'm not gonna be tearing it a new one, you know.
Moving on.
But anyways,
Go check this out. Both Luke in Episode 4 and Rey in The Force Awakens, they both demonstrate great piloting skills, and both clearly state that we got a pilot right here. Right? Arguably, Luke has a few more lines to spell that out, but both are mentioned.
Yeah.
But neither character shows their piloting skill prior to the climatic parts of the film. Right? The attack on the Death Star and Rey's first major action scene in The Force Awakens when they escape aboard the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
How is Luke's story and events leading to their victory different from Rey's?
So I believe that Luke has a lot more physical, real world piloting compared to Rey. Because the moment Rey pilots, you see, like, she can't even take off correctly. And like, it's something that if you drive in a video game and then drive in real life, there's a big difference, Even if you have 1,000, I'm sure like a lot of kids who have thousands of hours driving in whatever video game they play, a Forza or GTA, first time they touch a car, they realize like, oh, this is different. Like, the sensitivity is different, but the fundamentals are still the same. So I see that when Luke has a lot more practice, so he gets into a ship, he's a lot more familiar with actually driving something, feeling its engine and going. Whereas Rey, she only knows the virtual. Now, how is the virtual piloting in Star Wars? I have no clue. I really don't know. But I have played video games and I know it's very different, Sure, I could maybe pilot an airplane. Maybe. If I get in the air, I think I'll be good. Like as soon as I'm in the air, I'll be fine. But taking off, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'd be able to actually take off.
That's a tough part, here's my criticism of Rey. Even though both of them only mentioned briefly of their piloting skills, Luke's experience is flying fast like a reckless teenager through a canyon, it's one wrong move, you're dead meat, you're gone. So it stands to reason that his skill is shooting womp rats. Just the word rats. Obviously, it's a fictional universe, but there might be some sort of like very small critters that he's blasting off while piloting in a canyon. That's got to sound pretty awesome, even though Luke himself may not impress you with his awesome persona, because clearly Han Solo overshadows him in the first half of the film with his skills, with his shooting and everything. He's the guy. With Rey, we don't even know what sort of piloting she does. It's a little bit hinted at in one of the expanded universe books, the canon books, which I don't believe should be a part of this discussion, because I need to know.
I'm including them out. Yeah,
right.
Out of it.
Because all of the story that I need to understand needs to be on screen in the film, whether related to us, some kind of exposition, or directly explained and shown on screen. And aside from her saying, I am a pilot, well, I don't know what kind of pilot you are. And you're right to point out that the taking off on the Millennium Falcon was a bit rough. But here's the thing.
It was almost disastrous.
It was almost disastrous.
Like,
I would much rather believe Luke's piloting skills in a trench run, because it is very comparable to a canyon, versus Rey jumping off and immediately she's confronting who? Professional military pilots, the First Order TIE fighters. Like, my dude, are you serious? Not only are you going to escape them, but you're going to like find a way to maneuver the ship through the crazy like run through the destroyed wreckage of a Imperial Star Destroyer, and to have them crash and you not? That's a bit of a stretch. And I think it takes, once again, a leap of faith for both audiences, and you gotta suspend your disbelief to believe them. But in case of Luke, I think it's much more grounded.
No, I definitely agree with you there. In that case, especially since, once he gets to the trench, there's not really that anything complex to it. Just follow the trench. It's more, the leap of faith is more at when he takes the shot.
Right.
That's where the leap of faith is really with Luke. Whereas the leap of faith with Rey is getting away from, professional military men. And in this case, it's who the heck knows what passes through the virtual training that she did. But independent of that, let's talk about her life as a scavenger. Now, how many ships, how many destroyers do you think are even on Jakku?
Quite a few.
But in 10 years, do you think she would have passed through most of them in her area?
That's the problem and that's where you can layer as much criticism as your heart's desire. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, right? The film doesn't convey anything about this. This is more of like critical thinking. It's like how long she's been there, how well she knows the ships.
Right.
This is her job. I mean, if you're working anywhere for 10 years, I'm pretty sure you know the layouts of where you can go and where the things are. You probably draw a map of it. And in this case with Rey, I feel it's the same. Of course, I'm taking a leap of faith here. Like I'm imagining she chose a specific Star Destroyer that she can go through.
Okay. Okay. And I think it's totally fine too, because I was doing it as a kid, watching the original trilogy in the 80s on VHS. I think it's beautiful when an author or a filmmaker leaves enough room in your story for an audience to interpret. Because for a long time, before we got the prequel trilogy, we didn't know exactly what Vader's past is. And I think it only enhanced the character and made him more alluring and mysterious, where each individual, each person kind of tailors the story to what they want to believe. Oh, maybe, because when I saw Vader for the first time, it's the first image I remember of Star Wars as a 7-year-old kid who saw him strolling into the on board of Tantive 4. And the moment I saw them and made that visual distinction between Vader and the regular stormtroopers, for some reason, my first thought was, I remember it clearly, man. I was like, hold on a second. He's dark. This black-clad armored knight has got to be more like him. He's probably the elite, right? The Empire probably have these tough dudes who are in charge of all these white guys, and and they're running around and they're commanding officers. So that was my little dream, my little imagination. Lo and behold, we get the prequels, and we know there's only the Master and Apprentice, where the story is evolved by George himself. Next, one aspect that I felt was actually decently communicated in the sequels is Rey's strong affinity to the Force. And we see that in Maskinata's storage, where obviously she sees the Luke Skywalker's lightsaber.
Yes.
Right? And she has that Force interaction with it. And her first confrontation with Kylo Ren pretty much goes as expected, right? She grabs Han Solo's gift, his blaster, and she's like, pew, 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 but it doesn't work. Because clearly, Kylo Ren, a guy who suspends a blaster bolt while he's having a conversation, is shown to be a lot more adept at the Force than Rey is. And as a result, she's kidnapped. And Kylo demonstrates, as I mentioned before, much greater Force skill, technical ability. Let's get into the Twilight Zone of the Force Awakens. She has instant grasp of specific technique, mind control, when she is abducted, right? The adle-minded stormtrooper, which she's able to control. Was it as a storyteller's job in respect to character development? What is he supposed to convey in order for us, the audience, to believe that scene when she mind controls a stormtrooper?
Yeah, so when I watched the film the first time, there was actually a thought that came through. There was a few thoughts that came through my head in the torture sequence, right? Because it had shown previously what Kylo Ren can do, to interrogate people and how he extracts information. So when he's doing this with her, it's different. And then when she's able to fight back, I was thinking like, okay, hold on. Something's different here. Something's off. What's going on here? Of course, we have no idea what the dyad is. This is, only revealed in The Last Jedi. But I already had a clue of something of like, okay, so something happened in that torture room. I understood that she suddenly had the ability to do a mind trick, and I understood it was from Kylo torturing her, but I didn't understand why.
Yeah. See,
I know a lot of people didn't get that.
With me, I think it's a really, really strong stretch, and it takes your own imagination to complete that scene, which I feel the way that I wrote the question to you is that what is the storyteller's job? And to me, a storyteller's job is, even when you're dealing with some ethereal concept as the Force, you visually need to convey specific points of what you're trying to tell me. And in that scene, when she's controlling a stormtrooper, she even says the word, "You will do this," obviously hearkening back to the scene in A New Hope where Obi-Wan Kenobi, the old and wise master, is also controlling stormtroopers. Yeah. Here is my harsh and unapologetic criticism of J.J. Abrams. Here's a guy who steps into a franchise which he claims to be a scholar of, but he's a pedestrian Star Wars fan at best, because he doesn't understand, or he did a piss poor of a job conveying it on screen, because it takes skill, it takes training. How do we know it from just A New Hope? Right? Because to be fair, we're only discussing the first two films on the first two trilogies. And I can't jump ahead and talk about all the training in the other original Star Wars films or the expanded universe. I don't care about that. I only go by what I saw in the film.
What you saw, yeah.
And the person who does that in A New Hope is clearly a seasoned veteran, a Jedi master. And he does it with such authority portrayed by Alec Guinness that Luke is like, he's doing this. Like, what the heck is going on? Like, he's mind controlling them? Wow. With Rey, it was a handout. It was a gift. It was this like just free experience points in video games terms, saying that, see, she's powerful.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing which is very, very hard to disregard when talking about, is Rey overpowered in The Force Awakens or not? Because I believe in that specific point she is.
I disagree. And I'm going to tell you why. The problem is not with Rey, it's with the dyad. It really is with the dyad. Because in a way, you see that Kylo Ren, he's done all the training. He's done everything. He's got all the experience points. And then all of a sudden, we have something that passes to Rey. Of course, when you're watching the movie, you don't know. I knew there was something because I know I've seen him, with other movies, and he's always talked about his mystery box. Like, oh, I
Yeah,
have my
right.
mystery box. You got to have the mystery box.
Mhm.
So I was looking for it. Of course, this is not a Star Wars thing. This is a J.J. Abrams thing. But I was already looking for it. So I guess in a case, in my case, I was kind of prepared for some mystery. Like, why is this happening? What's going on? You know,
I think it's where both of us as fans will have to demonstrate our goodwill and chivalry to agree to disagree, because
of course.
I understand your position. I accept it.
Yeah.
But in my case, it wasn't communicated well, and I didn't have to rely and wait for the explanation in the next part, because the twist is
Yeah.
quite different from saying to Luke, I'm your father, in the Empire Strikes Back, and get the resolution to that later, because you lead up to that point, you tell us what the heck this thing is, and then in the last movie we get the full details. In here,
Yeah.
there is no preface why or reasoning why Rey should have any sort of power, even though that's what J.J. Abrams claims his intent was. Just like his intent was that he says that they always knew they would resurrect Palpatine. I don't believe it for a second. I think it was him trying to cover his ass at the end and say, but no, hold on a second, we did the diet thing.
Agree.
So to me, this is
agree
what
with that,
where the clash of opinions comes from, where just based on The Force Awakens, it wasn't well done.
Yeah, it didn't. It didn't. I guess you could say, like, in a in a casual perspective, just going to watch the movie, you want to watch a complete film. And this is like the biggest issue I have with the sequel trilogy is all the trilogies have their issues. In this case, for me, it's the fact they're treating it like a TV show. Like, whoa, what's going to happen in the next episode? And I think they took the name episode 2 literally in this case.
Yeah, the A New Hope as obviously was made as a potential one-off, because George Lucas, even though he wrote the treatments for the whole trilogy, he didn't know if it's going to succeed or well, if he's going to be able to sell it or even make the movie, right? We all know the story of how challenging it was to produce A New Hope, so he had to have some sort of a conclusion. And I know actually a score of old school 70s fans who only like A New Hope. They don't like the sequels. They say, you know what, if you look at the logical evolution of the story, it pretty much concludes at the end of episode 4, where they defeat the evil. They destroyed the biggest weapon. It's done. What do we see in the other two original film sequels? Another Death Star. It's a repeat of the same theme over and over again, with more moving pieces in the story. But anyway, moving on. Next, we have something that you have already touched upon. I wanted to home in and focus a little bit on this battle of wills, right? Because Kylo Ren, and we can debate his level of skill with the Force, but he pushes Rey's mind to extract the map, right? She's the key element of the plot, right? She knows the details to Luke, how to find him. And to be fair, that we see that both Adam Driver's and Daisy Ridley's performance show very two distressed young people in that scene, in that torture scene, when he's trying to probe her. And I personally even saw some minor sense of even like checking each other out, because they're both young man, a young woman, and there's some already the sexual tension begins, which I think we'll touch upon in episode 8 and 9, which I think was very well conveyed in all of them. It was very minor. Well. It was very low. You had to dig for it, but it's there on screen. And the way that Kylo is looking at her, with his hair there, he's not exactly your typical good-looking guy, but he's very interesting. And Adam Driver is like his very intelligent performance, and his look and his gaze, and all the subtext that you see in The Force Awakens in that particular performance was brilliantly delivered. And anyway, the question that I had is, Phil, please sell this to me. How in Space Anakins is it possible that when Kylo Ren is pushing against her with his skills, she's able to overcome him and completely push him out and say, nope, I got this. I got this base coverage too.
No, movie-wise, this doesn't make any sense at all. It really doesn't. Like, he should be able to completely dominate her. In this case, the arguments that I do think of is that when they do this, there's a stronger connection to the dyad, and then she understands how to counter it because of his knowledge. Or you could understand it that because Snoke put the dyad there, he wanted these things to happen for some reason. You know,
So
have
Snoke's
this
involvement.
crazy Palpatine moment where it's like, oh, I was planning it all along, you know. But yeah, really, it's like, how could he? I have this argument all the time with this movie, and one of the things, like, really, she shouldn't have been able to. The only reason she can is because of the dyad, or because Snoke, let her do it. But uh, in this case, it really doesn't make sense to me. But it's something so minor that I'm not bothered by it. I'm just like, especially today, because I have the answers already. I am the
Right.
key master, I got everything. So it doesn't bother me today. At the time, I watched that movie a few times trying to figure that out. It's like, why was she able to overcome him?
Yeah. I think there's
Like,
two things to consider here. Number one is when Lawrence Kasdan was co-writing the script with J.J. Abrams, encouraging him to say, trust the audience, because they know this franchise more than anyone else, the fans.
yeah.
J.J. Abrams, being a pedestrian Star Wars fan that he is, he said, well, they already know how the Force works. Let me rush through things and get to the juicy part, okay? That's what she's able to do. Just come on, it's space fantasy. Let's go. On the other hand, if I were to make a very, very stretch of a case in favor of Rey, see, the way that the original trilogy was done is George Lucas talks about it without end in multiple interviews. But you see an evolution of thought and ideas. Because
Yeah,
clearly,
they're constantly changing, and
exactly.
he's building upon what he decided. Like, okay, this is concrete. Let's keep going. Let's see what else.
And then he
fits.
evolves it.
Yeah,
Because you clearly
exactly.
see how Luke and Leia turn into a brother and sister after their incest kiss. Like, okay, where are we going with this? It's obvious that Vader turns into Luke Skywalker's father because they need that grand ending. George says it all. He says, in the Empire, in the second movie, I needed that plot twist. And that's how I got it.
Yeah.
And it's okay because it is so well thought out in the original films. It's precisely so, okay, I'm going to change things up and modulate my story here, but how I do it in a way that doesn't entirely disregard what I've done before. And it's an evolution of thought. Where in case of the sequel trilogy, it's all over the place. And one case I want to make for Rey is her mysterious past that is not divulged in The Force Awakens. If we stick with the premise that, hold on a second, who is Rey? In my mind, she's Luke's daughter. She's his estranged daughter that he hid. For some reason, they're separated. And she did receive some training as a young prospect with that intense, powerful Skywalker bloodline and abilities, that potential, that she's able to do all that stuff. And because we don't have all the answers, I sort of kind of believe that because there's more to come. We know it's only episode 7 out of the planned trilogy. So that's the case I would make for her.
I mean, when I was watching it, I let people theorize, and I didn't let anything like I didn't set my heart on anything. A lot of people were just like, oh, it could be Obi-Wan's daughter, could be also Han and Leia's daughter. Who knows, right? And I was just like, I'm fine with just her being Rey and being abandoned and
Rey no
whatever.
one.
Yeah, a Rey no one. But yeah, in the case of the dyad, they really could have hinted better at it with the first film. They really could have. It could have been just something that Snoke said, for example, is like, "Oh, the dyad is in place," or something like this. That it would have made a big difference, because you'd be like, "Okay, what is the dyad?"
Exactly. A little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of
throwing
us some crumb changing, right? And giving us some detail of like, hold on a second. Like it engages your mind, your imagination, but now you have to wait because more is coming.
Yeah. Just like the first movie. The first movie talks, you have Ben and Luke talking, and then all of a sudden Ben's like, yeah, I knew your father. We fought in the Clone Wars. And like, you fought in the Clone Wars? Like, I mean, hearing that as a kid's like, what the heck is a Clone War?
Exactly. But it already gives you some sort of background, some sort of setting from which all these characters are coming from. Now, the big piece of discussion, the lightsaber duel. Oh
I
boy,
love the lightsaber
here,
duel.
here we come. So
Let's go.
after killing Han, we clearly see that Kylo, he catches the fist-sized blast in the gut. That's a parting gift from Chewie, because his homeboy, right? He gets killed in front of his eyes, and he goes back and retaliates at the son. And we see visibly, emotionally, how torn apart Kylo Ren is. And I mean, the performance comes through.
Exactly.
Right.
Adam Driver, he did a great job with that.
And you see that Kylo's character is very, very compromised, both physically and emotionally. Yeah. And we see Finn's second lightsaber scene, right? And it stands to reason that he had some sort of First Order Stormtrooper melee combat training. Why? Because we saw him fight another clone who has some sort of vibro weapon, vibro baton or something. And Finn manages to grab a lightsaber, and not in a very Jedi-like way, basically batting it as a stick. Yeah, he's able to hold his own.
Very much
he has soldierly background. But he is very easily dispensed with by Kylo Ren. Like, he's almost mortally wounded. Boom, he's on the ground. And now it's Rey's turn to show off her skills. Now, she pulls the lightsaber with a telekinetic skill. Yeah. And I want to point out something very specifically here. I'm jumping ahead a little to the Empire Strikes Back, but it's something that happens in the Wampa lightsaber scene, right? In the Wampa cave where Luke is being abducted by this creature. What does he do? He calls his sword lightsaber to him, and it's before he meets Yoda in Dagobah and receives his formal training. And of course, the battle between Kylo Ren and Rey begins. And I would say also that the sequel trilogy's battle choreography is deliberately more chaotic. It's not as grounded as the original trilogy. It's not as flashy as the sequel trilogy. It has its own sensibilities, which are very calculated and specific. But anyway, we see Rey assume stances. She pulls off specific lightsaber moves. She deflects Kylo Ren's attacks. And surprise! She wins against Kylo Ren. We did mention that he's compromised. We did mention that he's emotional.
Yeah, of course.
I call to yours and mine basic common sense. How in the world is this possible?
All right, so Rey is not incompetent in combat, especially melee combat at all. She's really not incompetent at all. She has a lot of skill with her staff. And one thing that the first time watching it, like, I found it so interesting is the fact that, she did have some stances, but she treated the thing like the end of a staff. Because look at most of the time she's going like this, but then she's just trying to poke him all the time. Because she knows that's how a staff works, and this part kills. So why not do this, right? And that's what she's doing for most of the time. And it's so obvious to me because I watching the three films, I actually can see her evolution of how much better she treats the lightsaber in comparison. But that first fight that she has with a lightsaber, she's just using everything she knows about her staff combat to survive pretty much. She's not even fighting to win. She's fighting to survive.
She's definitely on the
Daisy
defensive.
Ridley, fantastic. You see in her face, she's full of fear from Kylo Ren. Completely full of fear.
Right, until that last moment where she closes her eyes and trusts herself. She releases herself to the Force.
Yeah, she remembers Maz talking to her about the Force. Yeah,
it is going to be, I think, a awesome and fun discussion with you and I when we get to it with her training in The Last Jedi. I think it'll be an awesome discussion.
Yeah,
but let's not skip ahead and get to this part.
Okay,
I enjoyed the duel from the visual standpoint. And I did come out of The Force Awakens generally impressed and happy because my experience with the prequel trilogy was very sour. Very, very sour. Most of
mine
the fans...
too. Like the last film, I had watched Attack of the Clones, and it was, at the time, it was a bore fest to me. I did not feel the emotional impact I was supposed to feel. Like, I was watching the movie and I knew I was supposed to feel something, but I did not feel it.
Yeah.
you
But
know.
anyway, the point that I'm making is,
Sure.
aside from general satisfaction from The Force Awakens, you come out and, your first happy emotions kind of subside and you get to cook it in your mind for a little while. And then years obviously pass by. And here we are talking about it 10 years after. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe. Okay, we do have a precedent. As I mentioned before, she does fend herself off against two assailants. We don't know their skill level. It's a very brief scene. She uses the pole.
Yeah, but we can see her skill level.
Right, we see her skill.
obviously. Like
A
she can
bit
hit
of her
hard.
skill versus questionable characters. In my mind, I thought, first of all, we see a lot of marketing materials which are, to me, misleading because she's always around carrying her pole. And my thing was, wow, are they going to be going in this bold direction? And in the sequel, episode 8, we will see her formal training with a lightsaber, but it's not going to be a lightsaber. It's going to be a light staff. Because
that's
she
what I
seems to
really
be
wanted,
visually connected with that thing in the posters, in a promo art, and Daisy really posing. They even had a prior video footage of her stunt double doing all that crazy stuff for the pole. And I was like, whoa, holy crap. Is it going to be a dual lightsaber like Darth Maul's, but only the good side, the light side user is going to be using it? What's going on there?
Yeah.
When she picks up that lightsaber, before Mark Hamill gave his interview, I anticipated Luke Skywalker inexplicably standing there on Starkiller planet surface, grabbing that lightsaber, like, come on, boy. We got this. Come at me. And Rey staring in disbelief, saying, oh my God, the hero, the mythical character. He's not this forgotten hermit who is somewhere. He doesn't want to have anything else to do with the galaxy. He came back to kick ass. Instead, what happens, she grabs the sword and inexplicably she has moves. And all right. Yeah, it looks good. Yay, new Star Wars, Ben. Stay positive. Ben, celebrate. Okay, we got new Star Wars. Be happy. Be graceful and happy that we have new Star Wars. But I can't accept that.
I think it broke. The film had broken me very early on with the trailers. Because the moment I saw the trailers, I realized like, oh, okay, this is not going to be about Luke. This is not going to be about Leia. This is not going to be about their kids.
Yeah.
So going back to what we were talking about before about how people had theories of Rey being, someone's kid. I really didn't have my heart in any of that. I was like, I don't think so, man. Like, I don't think she's anybody's kid at all.
I think it was a huge mistake introducing the legacy cast. I don't understand George Lucas's reasoning, especially after him saying that the Skywalker saga ends with episode 6. Their journeys are at an end with every major character. Leave them alone. It's done. Move on to something else. Yet, he wanted to bring the original cast, and that's what filmmakers and storytellers always wants to do, because they want to bring that new excitement and use a legacy cast. And in every step of the way, Han, Leia, Luke in the sequel trilogy, they overshadow the lead cast. It's supposed to be about these kids passing on the torch to them. And constantly, the main criticism that you hear is like, I didn't want to see this version of Luke. I wanted to see Luke in his prime. Where's the Star Wars sequel trilogy that George Lucas would have probably directed in early 90s instead of prequels while the cast was in their prime? When they were young, capable, and there were more stories to tell. Instead of you telling us you're killing them off one by one in the sequel trilogy. And that's not what fans wanted to see. And I predicted that in 2012. I said, that's not going to go well because fans don't want to see their legacy characters used in such a way as passing the baton. Focus entirely on this new crowd and these new kids and empower them with how they get their powers, how they learn their lightsaber tricks and so forth. We rushed a little bit again with one of the biggest critiques I give to J.J. Abrams is his insanely fast breakneck pacing. It's like, slow down a little bit. Can we spend some time with these characters? There's hardly any action in the beginning of A New Hope. And you spend the time in that world on Tatooine and Anchor's Head, right? In the spaceport. You learn who Han Solo is in the canteen and so forth. So for me, it was tough, man.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. But like, It's something that I've really separated. I've noticed like what I want is very different from what other people want.
Yeah.
And what I wanted was honestly, I wouldn't have cared 30 years later. Okay, where's Cade Skywalker? Bring him. Like that's what I wanted. And the moment I saw the trailer, I'm like, there's no Cade Skywalker. I was like,
Okay.
okay, that's not the direction. So they're doing something new. I get that. But I completely understand what people get. I mean, I think one thing that really helps me is just that I really do see it as three different universes.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have the George Lucas universe, which is just the 6 films. We have the expanded universe, which is the films and the legends, and then we have the new canon.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have. We have these 3 universes. I'm completely fine with that. Like my only problem is if one day Disney decides to jump the shark and be like, okay, now they're all connected. That would be my only issue.
Yeah, I
right
always
now.
say it like a mantra on my channel. Star Wars. Don't tell anybody what Star Wars means to you. Not George Lucas. He's the creator. Again, we're not bringing our grandfather down by saying this, but in the end, what really matters is how you see it, how you experience it, what you feel about it. And don't let anyone, not the creator, not the artist, and not Disney or anyone else tell you what to think, or other fans who always clash heads and like, well, no, but you don't understand. Let me explain to you what Star Wars is. Like, I'm not down with that. But to bring it back into this critique or praise of Rey Nobody, can you make a compelling case of how Rey would have defeated Kylo Ren in that final duel in The Force Awakens?
How she would have done it?
How she would have done it. What would justify her victory?
Well, I already explained it to you. She already has fighting capabilities. I mean, it's hard for me to pass my knowledge to you. I do have knowledge of martial arts, and I've been doing martial arts since I was a kid. So just the way she moves, like obviously they trained Daisy really well to hold the staff to do that small scene she did with fighting, and also how they choreographed the final fight as well. I'm telling you, like she doesn't use it as a lightsaber at all. There's not one point where I'm thinking like some people were saying like, oh, she's using it as a baseball bat. I didn't even feel like she was using it as a baseball bat. I feel like she was using it as a broken staff. Like it was half a staff.
I get your
That's what
point.
she had, and I mean, sure, that's not what you want to see. That's not what you want to see. You want to see a really nice fight that
With
makes
trained
sense.
Jedi, right?
With trained Jedi, yeah. You want to see Luke come in and save the day, come out of retirement, so to speak, right? But that wasn't it. In the end, I thought it was beautifully made. Of course. As for story-wise, it made sense to me, especially. We're not going to talk about Kylo Ren. That's been talked to death. He's in an emotional state. He's shattered. He's not. Yeah. He's only 50% of the man. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. But in this case, it was definitely. Well, one thing I love is how it shows the pivot between the two, right? Because visually, in a way, it's like. You have Rey and Finn on one side who are just completely not ready for this fight at all, and Kylo Ren is just. I mean, he's generating so much hate. It looks like he's going after Luke. From how he's going after them. Yeah, and he takes out Finn with ease, and this is my big disappointment. It's Finn, but we'll talk about that later. But and then we get to the fight with Rey. Now Rey, it's an interesting contrast to me because the first encounter that they have, we talked about already. She has the pistol. She's obviously not familiar with firearms at all. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is her aiming the gun, and Han's just like, no. Like you don't know what you're doing.
Stop, kid.
Yeah. And And it's a contrast of she was shooting, she didn't have any weapon, she was completely hopeless, she was running away, completely retreating. Whereas in this case, in the final fight, she's retreating but not like completely running away. She's not keeping her back to him. She's making sure that he's not trying to stab her in the back, and keeping him away. And that's what I feel, especially from her body movement. She's always pushing him, like, get away from here.
She's on
Get
the
out of
defensive.
here.
Yeah, I think you make
Yeah.
excellent points. And there's two things I want to bring to our attention. Number one is there's different tolerance levels of suspensive disbelief. For an open-minded fan like you, it's totally fine to get that earlier scene on Jakku to say, look, she's proficient with a pole staff. That's it. Leave it at that.
I'm open-minded on a good day, okay?
Exactly. No, but saying, just to illustrate the point, right? That for some fans, it's okay. It was semi-decent enough for me because it is shown to us. I wish it was shown a little bit more. But anyway, it's there.
Yeah, I wish it was more fleshed out as well.
For other
really,
fans
really do.
who are a lot of us are very keen on details, and we pride ourselves on studying these films, one frame at a time. When you're telling a story, you built the world and you make it convincing by paying attention to small detail, one after the other, because that's what film is. It's a still shot by still shot. It's a picture by picture by picture, and you built that world. And if it's unconvincing, and if you miss the point somewhere, you're going to lose your audience. And this is my case, being a fan of The Force Awakens in general terms, this is my argument against Rey. Yes, Kylo Ren is wounded, and yes, he's emotionally compromised. He's fighting against a trained soldier / deserter who demonstrated no small measure of skill versus his former comrade stormtrooper. He goes like, traitor! And, we saw some pretty interesting choreography going on there. And Finn, not being a Jedi, handles himself pretty well. A military trained soldier. And now we're dealing with a scavenger who knows how to keep this pole close to her chest and defend herself when necessary. Because her job may entail some unwanted encounter with other scavengers, maybe fight for territory and saying, no, this piece is mine. I'm going to bring it to Unkar Plot. I'm going to get the money, get away from my territory. Sort of, but when we get to the battle, you're facing a guy who is holding a blaster bolt for 5 minutes as he's having a casual conversation with Poe.
Yeah, so he has a very strong grasp.
Excuse me here for a second. You're showing me somebody with awesome power, and you cheapen that effect as a filmmaker when it doesn't come through at the end of your story. Because what happens? Kylo gets his ass handed to him at the end. He falls down. He has a slash across his face. We know who's the victor in that scene. And it's not an equal distribution of power, because you're supposed to show us this young, angry man who is not fully trained, and there's a lot of angst in him, but he's clearly more powerful than her. I see no justification why you should hand her the victory. Beat her, scare her to death, make her escape Starkiller Base with Chewie holding Finn on his hands, like nearly dying, and now she has a greater danger to stand up to in the next film. Why do you have to give her victory? They destroyed the Starkiller Base together. It's her movie. She's a central figure in it, and I have nothing against her. I love my female leads when the story is well done, when she's not overshadowing her male counterparts, which I have no issues here in The Force Awakens. We're going to get to that part in The Last Jedi a lot, with angry soccer moms, purple hairs, and turning your male counterparts to shit. That's going to happen in part 2, okay? Let's stick to The Force Awakens here. The play between the foe, Poe, Finn, and Rey is great. And she's the lead. She's the star. She's the light in the dark. And I believe in that part, but her victory was not earned.
All right. I disagree. I truly disagree, because, I think anyone can relate to this. Let's say you go out and you have a drink with some friends, or maybe you stay up a little too late playing a new game, or I don't know, something gets you out of your routine. But then next morning, you gotta wake up 4 a.m., catch the bus, get to work, and all of a sudden you got this brain fuzz where like you're doing this job, but you've been doing it for who knows how long. You've been doing it manually, and all of a sudden today you're making a bunch of mistakes, a lot of mistakes. And you're like, you're looking at yourself, you're like, what's going on with me, man? What's happening? And I really believe that's what was happening with Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
He got to the point where he was completely like blinded by his hatred for what Rey is standing for at the moment, you know, because she's kind of like almost his replacement.
Yeah.
Because Stoke was just like, you know, this kid, what the heck is he doing? I'm gonna get this girl. This girl's doing a better job, you know. He is, of course, he's in terrible, terrible pain, and he just killed his father, man. And he killed his father not because like, oh, I hate my father, I want to kill him. He's killing him like, I want to be like my grandfather. I think this is the solution.
And it's clearly, you see the effects of it immediately. He's like, what did I just do?
He regrets it.
Yeah.
Immediately he regrets it.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's almost like he's completely hungover. And he's doing a pretty good job for someone who's completely hungover.
Yeah. I think that one of the most beautiful scenes in The Rise of Skywalker, which there are a lot of elements I love in The Rise of Skywalker. And I always describe it in short terms as 2 films worth of content butchered and spliced down to 1 movie.
That's exactly what
it should have been split into 2 films, and it could have been something great. Jumping space horses aside, no, please, I don't want that. But no jumping horses, please, none. Please. I'll even take Palpatine. Yeah, save me the horses. But one last thing I will say about Kylo Ren, because we got to wrap this up, is Adam Driver's brilliant performance makes it a lot more believable than J.J. Abrams' script. He sells me the tragic, fallen, abandoned, shunned kid. Like, we don't know the exact past, why it went so wrong between him, Han, and Leia. And I think that's the remaining and enduring beauty of Kylo Ren, that there was this rift, there was this separation. Figure it out what it exactly was. Please don't spell it out. Please don't give me another trilogy about Kylo Ren, how this came to be. It's going to ruin it. Just like for me, unmasking the Vader was a huge detriment to the character, to me personally. But Adam Driver made a point of it, because one of the most beautiful scenes in The Rise of Skywalker, which to me was a huge surprise, when they managed to bring Han Solo back, and he does
You're
this.
getting a little ahead of yourself.
Oh man, I was on the verge of tears, and I never cry in film. I was like, JJ, screw you, man. Like, you screwed up this whole film, but you give me this beautiful scene. Oh, man. And he says, come home, son. Which harkens back, fully reveals what Kylo was experiencing when he murdered the patricide. He understood fully the effect of his actions, but taking responsibility for
I think you're giving I don't like J.J. Abrams as a director. I'm going to put that out right there. But you're not giving him enough credit. Because yes, of course, Adam definitely like takes the character home.
Right.
But there are some things that are decisive in the design of the character and his actions and how he reacts to things that show how completely unstable he is.
Yeah, that's true.
So for example, the Kyber crystal. Fantastic. I never imagined I would see such an unstable kyber crystal in a live action representation. It was fantastic. It's definitely with Kylo Ren.
You're talking about the character of his lightsaber blade.
Yes, right? The laser, how unstable it is, you know, because it's not from what I understand, it's not a perfect crystal, so it has this effect where it's just like chaotic, right? And it shows one part of the character visually, But then you have his temper. He
Right.
has a completely uncontrollable temper, like a bull, completely like a bull, to the
He's
point where,
unhinged.
unhinged. The officer is pissing in his pants, trying to give him news and wondering, like, am I going to be alive in the next few seconds or not?
That was so
And he
different. Like fans were
completely,
reacting it on. Wait a second. I thought he's gonna be choking people. He's throwing this tantrum. We didn't see that before
yeah,
in
he
Star
throws
Wars.
tantrums, and he completely destroys the console right in front of him. And then he tightens up. And he's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's get back down to business. And it completely conveys this fear, but it sets up emotionally, it sets up how he's gonna react in the end. And in the end, he's a bull.
Yeah.
He aims for his target, but that's the problem. He becomes mindless. And he completely instead of having this calm focus, it's not like Vader. Vader had his hatred, but he was still calm. It was like
Right.
an engine in
Composed.
a way.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a V8 engine. Now the car is on, but just because the car is on doesn't mean you gotta accelerate all the way.
Exactly. These are strong
Whereas,
points you're making.
yeah, and Kylo Ren is complete the opposite. He is the Mustang with the V8 engine, constantly accelerating and going straight ahead in this first movie. That's him in this first movie. And so in the end of the fight, Ray has the composture compared to him. He does not have any composture at all. He is completely shattered. He is the bull just aiming at his target. His target is there, and Ray's got the flag at the moment.
Okay, I like how you put it. Guys, we're gonna deal with one more question here. And Phil, I want to thank you for being here on the podcast. It was really awesome to talk to you about. And I always have these podcasts to illustrate a point that you could have completely opposite takes on Star Wars and have a good time with it. It's like at the end of this day, yes, it's our lives. We're fully invested in it. But it's like, what? It's okay to have a different opinion and share and learn from one another. I have a blast doing that. You're really awesome. I really enjoy your making all these points. And I see, obviously, I was strongly taking the case of, against Rey, and you were defending her. But I actually agree with a lot of what you have to say. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on, the scene which I really loved on Acto, where Rey goes to meet Luke Skywalker and obviously cuts off on a very confusing scene. What's the connection there? Who are they? Let's talk about Rey's background in light of The Force Awakens. When that first movie finished and the credits rolled, before we got to the consequent films, who do you think she was at the end of the day? What sort of background would explain or justify her gifts in the film?
Like the reason why she's there.
Why she's so in tune with the Force and demonstrating skills and abilities that are seemingly without training.
See, that's why this movie, like we were saying before, it has a horrible job of just making one film and not setting up for the next film, because we have a sequence of events that happen, luckily, she does have her hero's journey. In a way, she is the girl from Jakku. She has no interest of leaving Jakku. She wants to stay on Jakku. She's truly hopeful, like completely innocent, like a 5-year-old, that my parents are coming back. Even though it's great, it's been 10 years. Let's face the music. It's been 10 years. She wants to stay back. And she's very resistant throughout the whole film. But I think what happens is she finds a home, a father figure in Han, just because Han's not treating her like garbage. He's treating her nicely, and he's not treating her like everyone else in Jakku, because in Jakku, obviously, nobody is friends with anybody at all. you get that vibe. Like everyone is there, they're
They're
cutthroats,
all up for
they're
themselves.
ready.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're all off for themselves. Where Ray was a little bit different in the case of selling BB-8. Anyone else would have sold BB-8 in a heartbeat. But for some reason, I guess maybe she was a little bit smarter or a little bit more compassionate. She was like, wait, no, let's not sell this guy.
Yeah.
Let's see what's up with this. But I mean, throughout her journey, until she gets to Luke. All right, there's something that does bother me so much. Like I can forgive a lot of the stuff in the film. There's one thing that bothers me a lot in this film is uh Leia greeting Rey like she's her daughter, even though we haven't even established yet that Leia is force sensitive. With the force sensitive argument, sure, yeah, you can definitely argue like she knew what was coming, she feels the energy, whatever, but we're not using the force as a cop out. So like that's the one thing that really breaks the movie for me is like at the end of the film, you got all these people. Rey should still be a nobody. Like, why is Leia hugging this girl?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
I think once again I'm reiterating the point that I don't hate J.J. Abrams. I don't hate Rian Johnson. That's just my personality. I
don't hate anything.
Exactly. Exactly. I think
I'm more disappointed.
Yeah, but I want to say that, and that's me not kissing up to them. A lot of people know how disillusioned I was with the sequel trilogy, but I think everybody comes from a good place, trying to tell good stories, and then the realities of filmmaking step into it. The ongoing rewrites with episode 7 of the 5-month period to rewrite the entire script that was already ready for J.J. Abrams, and his own sensibilities of rushing through the story and not because to me J.J. Abrams' talent is encapsulated in Super 8. It's fantastic. It's an amazing film that I really love. But in this movie, there's a lot of charisma, there's a lot of lightheartedness, and this joyous union of a new young heroes. And like you mentioned before, this beautiful, charming, innocent child, Rey, who parallels Luke Skywalker's journey into the larger world. An absolutely amazing scene of her grabbing Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. She literally, the hero descends into the dark pit to receive her calling and stand on the path of her adventure and accept it eventually, right? And in general terms, I think to this day, it holds pretty darn well. It's an interesting film with its flaws. And right. And the one thing I want to say is what would enhance it and make it even better for me personally in the long run, because I personally believe, as a reader of the expanded universe for many, many years, that the prequel era was greatly enhanced by all the extra content and material telling you in full swing what the story is. And in case of the sequels, it's going to work out very well if they fully fleshed out on the Rey's past. But she works much better as a Rey no one rather than Rey Skywalker or Rey Palpatine. I think they should have trusted with a new branch of a hero that is not reliant on a Skywalker bloodline, and we would have taken it more in stride.
Go with this because, of course, they're taking the last name and whatnot. But I'm not a fan of the Rey Skywalker title. I thought like for her to be complete as a character, she would just be like Rey. Like I'm just Rey. Like that's it. Like it's like that's me and whatever. But I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? It would be interesting, though, if she does rebuild the Jedi Temple and carries that as a name as a master and not really like a last name. So, the master is up ahead. They will they would be granted the Skywalker title. Up ahead. But yeah, like you're saying, this is the biggest deception that I have with Disney right now. It's like they have a great era. The sequel trilogy has such potential, and they won't touch it with a stick.
Yeah.
they're like staying away from it because they're too afraid to offend everybody, even though they're still offending everybody. No matter what.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think the bold new direction would be to either two things: either completely recast the original cast and stop with that deep fake,
Please stop. Yes,
deep
please
fake
stop.
voice.
Rip the
Luke
Band-Aid
Skywalker.
off.
Exactly.
Yeah, just do it. Just
And
rip the Band-Aid off.
redo the story of a young Han, Luke, Leia, and Lando immediately after episode 6 and scrap all the stuff that you've been doing before. That's number one. And route number two, pick a time period, either drawing upon the old Republic that is well established, or
Yes.
choosing a completely new period like the High Republic, but in the distant future
Yeah.
or past, that is not tethered to the ideas that we have and notions of what Star Wars should be that all old school fans have, and literally start from new ground. That's the second
Start
round.
pretty much from scratch. I completely agree because one thing that I think is Star Wars strives the most when it tells stories that are completely unique.
Yeah.
If you look at the case of Andor, I mean, yes, it did have the base from Rogue One, but I watched that and I didn't see what was coming at all. I thought it was going to be completely different. It was this amazing spy thriller that I didn't know I thrived so much for in live action. I'm like, man, they need to stop trying to make everything canon and just make like these secluded, good stories, amazing stories. Because that's what Star Wars to me is more about. It's just about these amazing stories.
People,
Not
I
how
think,
they
are.
connect and everything. It's
Yeah,
like,
I think we're getting past the decade of comic book cinema where everybody has time to invest into this huge Marvel verse of interconnecting shows and stories. People are getting tired of it. It's like, give us Dune. Give me
Yeah.
just one movie that is a one-off or two-part. I'm going to have
Yeah.
my fun. And that's what Star Wars, the kind of vibe and energy that Star Wars needs. But anyway, Philip, it was a great pleasure to have you, man. I hope you
yeah, it was great.
find the time to come back here again. If you want to be a regular on guest, I could talk Star Wars with
Oh,
you
I
without
would
end,
love
man.
it, man. I would love it.
This was great. Guys, please leave all of your comments in the video section below. Tell us where you agree with Philip. Tell us where you take more of my position, my stance. What do you think Disney has done wrong? What are more constructive criticisms that you have that you think would be a route for the future Star Wars projects? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for checking us out. In our next podcast, we're going to cover The Last Jedi. We're going to finish with a boom with The Rise of Skywalker. I think both Phil and I will have a lot of things to say there. Thanks a lot for checking us out. We'll see you guys later. Take care.